we can capture this brilliance. Thank you everyone for being here. We are so excited to introduce Francisco Villegas, a dynamic education leader with over 25 years of experience, driving student achievement through high impact teaching, instructional leadership and coaching, strategic school transformation. He's really a systems thinker. So being able to learn from his expertise is just incredible. He currently serves as the Chief Academic Officer at Partnership for Los Angeles Schools and oversees a comprehensive education model designed to address leadership, instructional, cultural, linguistic, and policy issues across a network of schools. When we think about what does cross-functional teaming and systemic change look like, that's what Francisco really brings to the table. Since joining the partnership over a decade ago, Francisco's held several leadership roles, including Vice President of School Transformation and Systems Advising. He manages a staff of more than 50. I think it's pretty big. You have quite a big staff, and is responsible for driving academic improvement across many schools and impacting many teachers, and of course, most importantly, students and their quality education. So we invite you today to learn from whether you're at the state level, at the district level, whether you're in the classroom, paraprofessionals are here, social workers, that we have an opportunity to learn from Francisco's brilliance and expertise. And we're just so fortunate to have you here. Thank you so much. And I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you, Melissa. Good morning, Delaware. Buenos días. He decidido que hoy voy a dar mi discurso en español. ¿Qué les parece? Just kidding. All right, let's jump in. I'm going to project my slides here. It's an honor
to be for a Spanish keynote, though.
It's an honor to be here today, and I appreciate you all welcoming me into your community. I want to start by just saying that this conversation that we're having today and the conversations that you all are having around multilingual learners, empowerment and opportunity is a critically important one. I want to start at a high level by just sharing what my message is today. Education has historically been a gateway to opportunity for students and a gatekeeper to opportunity for others. We have the power to change this narrative and make education a bridge to opportunity for all, including our multilingual learners. To do this, however, we have to be intentional and deliberate about making it happen and about how we make it happen.
How is the fair?
Before I share anything professional, I'm going to start by just sharing something personal, because my story is not just mine. It belongs to so many students that we serve today. And before I jump into the story, I have a question for you. You see the image of a child in the slide there? I want you to tell me in the chat, what's possible for this child if he were to attend school in your system? What's possible for this child if he were to attend school in your system? I see a lot of anything, everything, the sky's the limit, success. Great. Thank you. This young man that you see here, his name is Joshua, and he is my youngest brother. We're going to come back to this a little later. The handsome guy on the left is me. Pictured here are my brother Jonathan and I. We had the same parents. We lived in the same households, but we had very different opportunities and very different outcomes. I'm going to come back to this as well. These are pictures of me at different stages in my life. I grew up the child of immigrant parents who came to this country from Mexico on work visas. Eventually, my mother became a US citizen. For a long time, we were a working class family until we weren't. We struggled deeply We moved from place to place, sometimes with relatives, at times homeless. We slept in our van. I attended school after school after school. The stars on the map here are the places I lived during my K-12 education. And just to give you a little bit of, so you could imagine how big this is about the quarter of the size of the state of Delaware, this region here. My father worked hard and eventually had a good job in auto body repair. He did custom auto body work, a lot of custom work during the lowrider times here in Los Angeles. And so we could finally afford to live in our own 2-bedroom apartment for a family of 5. That was a great thing for us because we weren't bouncing around from place to place. But one day a car fell off the lift at work and broke my dad's back. After months of medical treatment, he fell into a deep depression, then into alcoholism, and eventually he began to use drugs. A few years later, he was deported. Still, through all of that, when I was at school, I was seen. And I often wondered why. Well, I figured it out. In 2nd grade, I was tested for gifted and talented education. That label gifted followed me no matter where we moved, no matter the school. That word told every single teacher, this kid has potential. And it changed how adults treated me. It opened doors. I got pulled out for enrichment. I was offered advanced coursework and received every intervention I needed to stay on track. My teachers refused to let me fail. I often wondered and asked, why just me? Why aren't my brothers getting this? I did a little bit of research, and in Delaware, only 33% of multilingual learners are reading proficiently by 3rd grade, compared to 51% of native English speakers. But proficiency doesn't mean potential. I wasn't more gifted than my siblings. I just got the label. But what if every single multilingual learner had someone who looked deeper than the label? My teachers believed that I had potential. And I told you we'd come back to these pictures. They refused to let me fail, and they made sure that I was successful. I went into education because I want that for every child. Now, here's the part that hurts. I had the same parents, lived in the same homes, and attended the same schools as my siblings. But none of them were ever tested for giftedness. Not one. In order to be tested for giftedness, you have to have a teacher recommendation. So no one ever saw what they saw in me and them. 2 of my siblings are pictured here. I have 4 siblings altogether. And all of us had the English learner label, but only I had the label that opened doors. My siblings, all brilliant in their own right, were overlooked. They didn't feel supported. They didn't feel like they belonged. And their outcomes, well, heartbreakingly different from mine. What we believe about children matters. It impacts our behaviors, our actions. It impacts their outcomes. It impacts their lives. It impacts our future. My teachers saw potential in me. I have a successful career. I'm your keynote speaker today. Jonathan, wearing the green polo in the picture on the left, he was labeled as struggling and constantly was sent to on-campus suspension when he was in middle school and high school. He dropped out. He struggled with drug addiction his entire life. He's been in and out of jail. And he doesn't have access to rehabilitation services because he doesn't have an HMO or a PPO. Joshua, pictured on the right, is my youngest brother. Earlier, I asked you what was possible for him if he attended your skills school system, and you said anything, everything. The sky's the limit. Joshua struggled with reading all the way through high school. He graduated reading at a 2nd grade level. He slipped through the crack, so to speak. But we all know or have heard at some point what the research tells us about kids who are not reading by 3rd grade. I'd like you to enter into the chat. What do you know about where the research points when kids are not reading by 3rd grade? Prison, high dropout rate. More likely to drop out. Homelessness, not college. Prison, challenges, they won't catch up. Absolutely. That's right. So we have indicators that tell us very early on, right, what the trajectories for children might be. And that's why it's so critically important that we're supporting the linguistic needs of students. My youngest brother, Joshua, was murdered on August 18th of 2022. It was captured on video, and I watched it day after day at the murder trial. Labels carry weight. Some labels, like gifted, become a bridge to opportunity. Others, like English learner or multilingual learner, become a barrier, especially when we don't pair that with an assets-based mindset. Too many students are overlooked because the system is not designed to see their full brilliance. And we have the power to change that. In Delaware, only 35% of third grade multilingual learner students meet their English language growth goals. And by 8th grade, just 8% are proficient in both reading and math. These aren't ability gaps, though. And let me be clear, this isn't about placing blame. It's about telling the truth so we can build better systems, ones that are worthy of our students' potential. Because when we name the disparities honestly, we can design systems intentionally, systems that recognize every student's brilliance and rise to meet it. And I'm optimistic about what's possible. This quote is one that I keep front and center every single day. It's what has empowered me as a leader, as an educator, as a human being. If your why is strong enough, you will figure out the how. The key here is, though, we can't figure out the how as individuals. That is not what we need as a system. We have to figure out the how together. That is critically important. You got a glimpse of my journey as a student and as a person growing up and the things that I've experienced. Now I want to pivot to my professional journey. These are pictures of students in my classroom in the year 2011, 14 years ago. What do you notice? What do you wonder? Enter into the chat. What do you notice? What do you wonder? Engagement, happy, diversity, teamwork, genius smiles, collaboration, engaged, interaction, yes. Originally, I wanted to be a CIA agent. That was my dream job when I was in high school. I took the ASVAB and crushed it. I was in the 99th percentile. And they told me I could have any job I wanted. So I said, I know what I want to do. I want to go into military intelligence. But then I was in San Diego, California, ready to swear in, had done all my exams. And then my recruiter comes out and tells me, you have to choose a different job. And I was like, what do you mean? I thought you said I could have any job I wanted. And he said, yeah, but you can't go into military intelligence because your parents were not born in this country. So that was heartbreaking. So I had to go home and figure out, like, what am I going to do? So I became a teacher. Honestly, as an experiment. I wanted to see, could I create the kind of classroom my siblings deserved? I didn't get any training to create the classroom that you see here. When I was in the classroom, access to professional development was not what it is today. I didn't have access to a coach. I didn't have access to mentors. I created this environment because, again, I wanted to know, can I create an environment that helps every single student thrive? I was thinking about my siblings. I knew that I could thrive, and I knew that students that were already doing well would do well. But could I reach every single student? Again, back to the quote, right? If your why is strong enough, you will figure out the how. Did I have my students sitting in rows when I started teaching my first year? Absolutely. But very quickly, I figured out this isn't working. This is not what I want. I love the subject of math, and I'm a math major. And I knew my stuff, but at the end of the day, what I wanted to do was I wanted my kids to love learning. I wanted my kids to feel empowered the way that I did by learning. In my 5th year as a teacher, I was at the teacher's lounge and I overheard one of my colleagues saying that he wanted to get rid of AP calculus at our school because it was too difficult for our students and our students were not motivated and they had too many gaps in their learning. I was deeply disturbed when I heard this. So I confronted him and it didn't go well. He was a veteran teacher and he told me that I was still wet behind the ears and that eventually I'd understand. So I went home. I didn't sleep much that night. The next day, I got to school early and waited outside the principal's office until he got there. When he arrived around 6:30 in the morning, we went into his office and he asked me, "What's up?" I just said, "I want to teach AP calculus next year." And he asked me why. I told him what I had heard in the teacher's lounge and how disturbing it was for me. And then I also threw in there that 3 other principals at neighboring schools had been recruiting me, and I knew that they would give me AP calculus if I jumped ship. He didn't like my approach. Probably wasn't the best either, but it was effective nonetheless. I started teaching calculus the next year. And although my first year teaching AP calculus, I had more qualifying scores than the school had had in its 20 years of operating AP calculus combined, I wasn't satisfied because 2 of my students earned 2s, which are not qualifying scores. For those of you who aren't familiar with advanced placement exam scores, 3 is a qualifying score, 5 is the highest score that someone can earn. So after that first year of teaching AP calculus, I thought those 2 students, they could have been my 2 brothers, right? So even though I had everyone was applauding me for having such a high pass rate, I was like, it's not good enough. It's not good enough. So I reflected and I signed up for 3 AP calculus seminars that summer. I traveled around and I spent my whole summer learning. And every year after that, 100% of my students earned qualifying scores. In my 3rd year, I added AP Calculus BC. That's the next calculus course. The pass rate was 100% every year after my first, while also quadrupling enrollment in the program. By my 4th year, 90% of my students were earning 5s on the AP Calculus AB and BC exams. I had a few 4s and less than a handful of 3s. The folks at College Board informed me that I was the only teacher in the country with these results for Black and Latino students experiencing poverty. And that got me to think deeply about what I wanted to do the rest of my life. Note that I had many multilingual learners and students with disability in these AP courses. The one thing that I did to quadruple enrollment that I think is really important to name is that even though I was a high school teacher, I went into students' cumes and I was looking for all students who had at any point in their education career had shown some potential in math. And I went out and I recruited them and I had conversations with them. I said, I know that you're in 9th grade now, but when I was looking at your cume, I noticed that in 4th grade, you were doing really well in math. And then after that, not so much. Tell me what happened. And there was always a story behind that. So I said, what if I work with you and I support you and, support you in a way where you can take AP Calculus by the time you're in 11th grade, and then you can take AP Calculus BC before you graduate from high school. And many kids took me up. That was my recruitment effort. That's how I got more kids into AP Calculus. So I taught AP Calculus, AB and BC to Black and Latino students from low-income communities. I raised expectations, not just hopes. Again, 100% pass rate every year, quadrupling enrollment, because the reality is that the kids were always brilliant. They just needed a teacher that believed in them. And then I got to thinking, well, this isn't good enough. We don't We can't just have like one teacher here and there who is doing this kind of work. We need to be doing this as a system. And that's why, even though I loved being in the classroom, it's still my favorite job, I had to leave. I had to leave because I had a bigger calling. And my calling was, how do I make this happen for more kids? So sometimes people ask, like, so what did you do? Well, it's really not that complicated, right? I believe that my students had high potential, so I held them to high expectations. But sometimes we talk about high expectations, and we don't talk about it thoroughly enough. You can't just raise the bar. You have to raise the bar and you have to raise supports, right? Like when you raise the bar, you have to include appropriate supports in order for students to meet those expectations. You can't just say, oh, I'm going to hold them to high expectations and it's their job to meet them. And if they don't meet them, well, I gave them the opportunity. That's actually not true. Just raising the bar alone is not good enough. We have to raise the bar and we have to be very thoughtful about what students need in order to meet those high expectations. Our instruction needs to be effective, and we have to understand, regardless of what we teach, right, there's pedagogy that goes along with the content that we teach, and we have to think about that. For me, it was really about how do I get kids excited about math? How do I get them to think about problems and problem solve and talk about those things and learn from each other? And that's why I put them together, and that's why you saw them engaged and talking and smiling. I had two rules in my classroom. We're going to work really hard, and we're going to laugh really hard. That was it. We're going to have fun, but you're going to work hard in this class. And one of the things that I really struggled with as a teacher was I couldn't find a single textbook that was directly aligned to the expectations of the AP exams. So I had to scramble to pick and choose from different textbooks and assemble things. And that was another thing that always stuck with me. I was like, that took so many hours. I spent my Saturdays, my Sundays doing that. This is not scalable. We cannot expect every teacher to spend their evenings, their Saturdays, their Sundays writing curriculum. They need to focus on teaching. And that's why you'll hear me talk a little bit later about how important high quality instructional materials are. It's not about controlling what we do as teachers. It's really about equipping us with the tools that we need and that are directly aligned to the standards that we're supposed to teach, but also that include the resources and the supports for students that we're expected to implement. In addition to holding my students to high expectations, having effective instruction, on the adaptive side of the work, I delivered clear messages to my students every single day through my actions and through my words. I would say to them, this is important, you can do this, and I won't give up on you. I also said, I believe in you. You must believe in yourself. You matter, and you are worth it. I won't give up on you and won't stop working to help you believe, what I see in you. Those were messages that my students heard from me every single day. Messages matter, words matter. But these very simple messages, they nurtured trust and student agency. My students didn't want to disappoint me, ever. Now, I've transitioned from the classroom and I'm the Chief Academic Officer at the Partnership for Los Angeles Schools. I've shifted from influencing one classroom to influencing an entire system. At the Partnership for Los Angeles Schools, we support historically underserved schools across Los Angeles, places where students have every right to a high-quality education, even if the odds are stacked against them. For a few years, pre-pandemic, I had moved away from Los Angeles because of gentrification. When I was a kid, we were given a check to move out because they were building homes and people with college educations were moving to Los Angeles and basically pricing people out. So I ended up about 70 miles east of Los Angeles. And I was commuting 70 miles each way, which was around 5 to 6 hours round trip every day. I did that for 8 years to work in Los Angeles because these are the communities where I grew up. I live a lot closer now, but I wanted to work in these communities, and I was very intentional about looking for an organization that was investing in communities with high poverty rates. So let's pivot now. You've heard a little bit of my story. Now I want to pivot to the focus of today's conference, building bridges for multilingual learner success. This is a screenshot from the website of the English Learner Success Forum. It's an organization with great leaders and an organization that produces great resources. I wanted to show you this because I believe we must begin by ensuring that we have a shared understanding of the challenges we have in front of us before we start looking for solutions. Then, once we really understand the problems and the challenges, and we've asked the questions and interrogated to ensure that we have identified the right problem, then we have to be very intentional and deliberate about addressing those challenges. But I want to get a little bit closer to the work that you all are doing. I got to read this strategic plan. I really appreciated how easy it was to read and digest. It's one of the shortest strategic plans I've read in a while. And I really appreciated that because it was really clear. But I want to say something about the things that you all value in the state of Delaware. So first, this idea of multilingualism as an asset. Multilingualism isn't just a skill, it's a superpower. Our students who speak multiple languages are thinkers who move between worlds. They bring creativity, cultural insight, and problem-solving skills to the classroom. We have to recognize that in order to nurture it. When we recognize multilingualism as an asset, we shift from a deficit mindset to one of empowerment. It's not about what students lack, it's about what they bring. This second value about collaborating among partners. What I've learned is that to meet the needs of students, we have to work together. Meeting the needs of multilingual learners takes a village. Collaboration isn't just about working together, though. It's also about listening deeply, aligning goals, and sharing responsibility. Whether it's community organizations, families, higher ed, or policy leaders, we have to ensure that everyone is on the same page. That's why I really appreciate this conference. You're bringing a lot of different folks together that need to be in the same space, talking to each other and problem solving around this challenge that we have. We have to serve our multilingual learners just the way that we serve all students. So let's think about getting on the same page and understanding the assets that our students bring. And let's get on the same page about the commitment that we're going to make to support their success. When all of us partners are aligned, resources are more effective and students are better served. This third value, our multilingual learners bring rich, varied life experiences into the classroom. These experiences are shaped by their language, their cultures, their migration journeys, and family histories. Honoring this diversity means creating learning environments that value those stories, reflect students' identities, and adapt instruction to meet their unique needs. When we understand and embrace their individual paths, we not only deeply engage them, but also affirm their sense of belonging. And lastly, this is the fourth core value called out in the strategic plan. Our schools have to reflect the worlds our students live in and the world they're entering. That means constantly adjusting our approaches to align with the changing cultural and linguistic dynamics of our communities. And I know this is very much present in the state of Delaware. Responsiveness isn't a one-time fix, though. It's a mindset. Again, being responsive to the needs of students is not something that we fix with strategies. It's not something that we fix with just thinking or talking. It's something that we have to be very deliberate and intentional about. And we have to remember this is about our mindsets. That's where it all begins. So for me, my success as a teacher had a lot to do with my mindset. It had a lot to do with why I went into teaching, right? So when we're thinking about being responsive, if we don't adapt, we risk leaving students behind. But when we stay attuned and agile, we ensure that every child has a real shot at success. The last thing that I want to connect to today is this theme for this conference, building bridges, collaboration, coherence, and community. When I was reading through that, I made a very quick connection to something that I had recently read that I'm actually embracing and I'm using as an anchor for the vision for the future of what's possible in my network. So we are being invited at this conference to imagine what's possible when we break silos, elevate student voice, and align our efforts in service of multilingual learners. However, this theme doesn't stand alone. It powerfully echoes what TNTP surfaced in the Opportunity Makers, that transformational schools center their work around 3 essential levers. And what I really appreciate about these levers is how simple they are. It's about belonging, consistency, and coherence. These levers, grounded in both research and lived practice, directly reinforce the bridges that we're being called out to build today. But I want to talk real quick about each of these. So I see belonging directly connected to your theme of community. Every student deserves to feel like they belong and to see their language, their culture, and identity reflected in the fabric of their school. Building bridges for community is fundamentally about fostering belonging. The Opportunity Makers reminds us that when students feel a strong sense of belonging, they are more engaged, more motivated, and more successful. Again, when we're asking ourselves, why aren't students being successful? Let's remember this. When students know that we know them as students and as people, they feel different about how they belong in this school community or not, right? So let's start there. Do we know our students as people and as students? And are we looking at their assets, not just what they lack? So for multilingual learners, belonging is cultivated when we build inclusive environments where home languages are celebrated, diverse experiences are honored, and family partnerships are authentic and also reciprocal. It's about moving beyond representation. This is important. Right? Moving beyond representation to deep integration, where every learner feels seen, heard, and valued. Consistency is another one of those key levers that is pointed out in the Opportunity Makers. When educators work in alignment within and across classrooms, students benefit from a predictable, supportive learning environment. The same is true for leaders at all levels. So collaboration, which is another part of the theme, builds the bridge to consistency. Consistency means that the experiences that students are having across classrooms are consistent, that the expectations are consistent, that the supports are consistent, that what they're learning and how they're learning is consistent across classrooms. Does it need to be exactly the same? No, but the rigor should be the same. What we're engaging with should be the same. How we're supporting students should be the same. And lastly, coherence. There's a direct one-on-one correlation here. But students thrive when systems and experiences are aligned, from what they learn to how they're supported to the expectations placed upon them. This is the most direct bridge. The coherence we aim to build at this conference is the very coherence that TNTP identifies as transformational. For multilingual learners, this means ensuring that instruction, interventions, policies, and programs all point in the same direction, towards rigorous, joyful, culturally affirming learning. But I want to say something that's really important. I encourage you to read the research, but one of the things that pushed my thinking here in this research is that we often talk about coherence amongst the adults. And what's critically important that the Opportunity Makers points out is the experience that students are having at schools coherent? Does it feel coherent to them? So as you think about coherence, think about the importance of aligning all of the different things that we do, but also, is that the way that students are experiencing school? So today, as we reflect, as we learn, as we build bridges across roles and regions, let's anchor ourselves in both our values and the evidence. Let's commit to building community that fosters this sense of belonging. Let's focus on collaboration that leads to consistency, and also coherence that aligns the systems in service of students. Because multilingual learners don't need fragmented support, they need unified intentional systems and leaders who believe in their brilliance and work together to unleash it. So I want to end with this quote. As we look ahead, one truth is clear. The future of education is multilingual, multicultural, and deeply interconnected. Our multilingual learners are not on the margins. They are the center of what's possible in our schools, in our communities, and in our society. You have the roadmap, you have the research, and most importantly, you have each other. Now is the time to lead boldly, to design schools where every student's language is honored, where every educator is equipped, and where every family feels seen and heard. This work is about creating bridges to opportunity for every student. So let's be the leaders, the teachers who choose to see multilingualism as brilliance. Let's be the educators who design with, not for, our students. And let's be the partners who move in unity, who honor complexity, and who never settle for less than what our students deserve. Our multilingual learners are counting on us, not just to believe in their potential, but to build the systems that unleash it. So let's rise to the moment together, because the children are our future.
Wow. 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 Getting major shout outs in the chat right now.
Appreciate it. I want to transition to just open up the floor for some Q&A.
Incredible. I know there was definitely a question about one of the slides you had, the right before we jumped into the strategic plan. There was a question
The English
about
Learner Success Forum.
it. It was one right after that, I think. Yeah. Amazing. You're getting lots of shout outs here. So powerful. Just your personal message, but your personal message, how that influenced what you did in your work, and how it was just so impactful and aligned and strategic and important. So incredible.
There's a quote that I want to share with you that has always stuck with me, because I didn't know this quote when I went into teaching, but it stuck with me because it's so powerful. And it's something that I invite you to think about, because words are important. And I'll leave you with this message, but I definitely want to get to some questions if folks have them.
I think it's a.
I would just want to, I'll read it. I'll tell you the quote, because I do have it memorized, but I want to project it, because oftentimes people ask, like,
Mm-hmm.
share the quote with me. So let's see if we. I'll read it. Watch your thoughts, they become your words. Watch your words, they become your actions. Watch your actions, because they become your habits. Watch your habits, because they become your character. And watch your character, because it becomes your destiny. And this just reminds me of just the importance of our thoughts. If you use some logic here, you can go from watch your thoughts, because they shape your destiny. And our thoughts do become our words, and they do become our actions. So we have to be very disciplined about what we think. And it all starts there, right? When you think about my story as a teacher, it all started with why I was going into teaching and what I believed. I believed that my siblings were brilliant and they should have been just as successful as I was. But I was trying to figure out, why is it that people saw them different? And I think a lot of it has to do with this idea of labels, the labels that we put on people, instead of just seeing people for who they are and really getting to know them, right? Seeing the whole person. Who are you as a person, but who are you as a student? What do you need as a person? What do you need as a student to thrive? We talk about a lot of things, and I know that a lot of things have become very politicized, but I want to talk about something that I think is really, really important. We have to ensure that our students are getting a strong academic education. But I think it's important for us to recognize that when students are in school, They're in classrooms with other people. And therefore, learning is a social endeavor. When students are learning, they're going to experience different feelings, right? When they are successful, they're going to experience joy and they're going to want more. But when students are struggling, they are also going to experience emotions, right? And they have to learn how to manage those emotions in order to be successful, right? If I'm struggling, what I'm going to feel is like, I'm having a very difficult time right now. I don't understand this. And I'm going to begin to not watch my thoughts and start to say things to myself like, I'm not good at school. I'm not good at this. I'm not good at that. So learning is also very emotional, right? We throw a lot of words around like social emotional learning, but what does it actually mean? We have to acknowledge the fact that kids are in a social environment when they're at school, and learning is social, but learning is also emotional, right? So we have to think about things that way. Don't just throw terms around like social emotional learning. Think about what does that actually mean? And then there's another term that's thrown around a lot, cultural relevance, right? And a lot of times when we hear the word cultural relevance, our minds go to, oh, kids need to see their cultures. And yes, they do. Those things are important. But I think another word is more important than cultural relevance, and it's called cultural responsiveness, right? What does that mean? It's more than just kids seeing their cultures and seeing themselves and what they're learning about. It's about truly being responsive, right? So the idea of cultural responsiveness is really about being responsive to kids' needs. So think about my siblings. They had needs. Those needs were unmet, right? That's what it would have meant to be culturally responsive, to ensure that my siblings, that my youngest brother didn't leave high school reading at a second grade level. That lack of responsiveness to his needs didn't help him, right? So those are the things we have to think about when we're saying these words that people are throwing around and politicizing. We have to stay focused as educators on what's important. The children are what's important. They are our future. So how are we meeting their needs? How are we helping them, right? And sometimes we overcomplicate things. That's what I appreciate about the opportunity makers. Can we create cultures where every student feels like they really belong? And can we get over ourselves and think about the fact that it's not about what I want to teach. It's about what do we need to teach as a collective so that we're educating our students with the same expectations, right? And then how do we connect all the dots? How does tier one instruction connect to intervention, right? When a student goes to their intervention class, is it preparing them to do better in tier one instruction, or is it completely separate, right? Because that's very incoherent when we think about it. So think about all of these things. Now, I could talk forever, so I'm going to stop
Well,
myself.
it's interesting because you just answered like two of the questions that were in the chat. One question specifically, as we think about ourselves as leaders, teacher leaders, many times as multilingual learners, specialists in the schools, we're also have two hats, right? We're leading and we're teaching at the same time. How do we help support teachers identify the necessary supports to meet the rigorous content when
Absolutely.
we're
Yeah. I think that one of the things, look, I'm a high school math teacher, so you could say like, oh, well, this guy's very focused, right? He's a math major. He's not a generalist. But the reality is that as a teacher, even though I had a math degree and I was a math major and I was teaching math, what I realized is that good teaching is good teaching, right? And good teaching starts with believing in the kids that are in front of you, right? Yes, mindset is absolutely everything. Um, so how do I identify the needs of students and meet them? So when I think about what I want to see in classrooms, I want to see language-rich environments. And this is coming from a math teacher, not an English language arts teacher. I want to see language-rich environments because language is so critically important to learning, right? They're so interconnected. So when I'm thinking about a classroom, I'm thinking, okay, first of all, what's my vision for this classroom? What are the goals that I have? I want all of my students to be successful. And the vision is I want this to be a thriving classroom. I want it to be language rich. I do want my students to be learning the academics, right? Soretta Hammond, who is in my opinion, one of the most powerful leaders in the country around education, talks about the importance of responsiveness, but also talks about the importance of really seeing students and meeting their needs, right? So how do we identify those needs? Well, first, let's start with making sure that we know what they have to learn, and then identify where are they on that journey. And then let's help them kind of bridge that gap, right? But it sounds easier said than done. When I think about multilingual learners, one of the most important things we can be doing as a system is thinking about, do we have language goals? It doesn't matter what content I teach. I'm a math teacher. I had language goals every day, right? Because I had a lot of multilingual learners in my classrooms. I had kids who were coming to the country as high school students who had some formal education, in some cases no formal education, and I just had to meet them where they were. I wasn't cherry picking kids. If you wanted to do math, come on in. We're going to do it, and I'm going to help you be successful. But at the end of the day, the language goals become so important because I'm not just teaching my content, I'm also helping students develop language. And one of the reasons that language was so important to me is because I grew up as an English learner, and I wasn't very confident with language at all. I was not. The fact that I'm here speaking to you as a keynote speaker, like I could have never imagined myself doing this as a child, ever, because I lacked the confidence. When you grow up poor, there are two things that are very difficult to come by, and one of them is hope, and the other one is confidence. So when you think about how do I identify those gaps? Well, first, let's start, before we start thinking about gaps, let's start thinking about what we want in our classrooms, right? We want language-rich environments. Let's be very clear about how we're developing language over time. And then once we identify kids who are struggling with something, we have to be clear about what they're struggling with. Are they struggling with language, or are they struggling with the content? And let's get very precise about meeting those specific needs, instead of just saying, this kid is struggling, they need help, and then it feels overwhelming, right? We have to get very precise about identifying what the kid's needs are. My favorite way of identifying what a kid is struggling with is talking to them, right? Like,
Yep.
just ask them the right questions. Like, what do you understand? But we have to, sometimes what's really difficult in a classroom, especially when you have like 40 kids in a classroom and you're going from period to period, for those of you that are secondary teachers, is we have so many kids, right? Like I had 180 students as a high school teacher throughout the day. But what I got very intentional about was like every single Friday, right? I set my kids up so that they didn't need me, right? Like I was there, but they didn't need me to learn. I set them up so that they took control of their education. And that meant I had, like, some of my students would say when they first got to know me, like, oh, this guy's really strict. He's mean, right? Like that was like the first couple of weeks of school. But what they later learned to understand is this guy has a very structured environment, and he has very clear expectations, and he's going to hold you to those expectations. But he also cares deeply about us, right? But you can't mess around in Mr. V's class. That's what they would say when someone would transfer into my class, right? You can't mess around in here. You have to work. We're going to have fun, but you're going to work. So yes, we have to get very granular. We have to get very specific. But sometimes we try to apply a lot of different strategies to kids without actually knowing what they think they need. So my job every Friday was I gave the kids a performance task every Friday. And then I said, get in your groups, go to work. They already knew what I expected. It was very clear. I had very clear success criteria on my anchor charts. And then I had a desk, my door open, my door was open, and I had a desk with a chair, one of those sled desks to hold the door open. And then I had another sled desk in front of that. And one sled desk, the one I was sitting in, I could see the entire classroom, right? So I was still observing everything. But then there was the sled desk in front of me where I had one-on-one conversations every Friday. But I didn't have one-on-one. Sometimes people say, well, that's a lot. Well, I didn't have one-on-one conversations with every kid every Friday. I was very targeted about who I was talking to. Who were the kids who weren't meeting my expectations? Who were the kids who maybe weren't doing their homework? And it wasn't always what's a sled desk? Maybe someone can find an image on Google and put it in the chat. But the the thing that I was very focused on was, um, ensuring that the kids knew that I was holding them accountable, right? So if you didn't do your homework, my first question was, I noticed that you haven't done your homework for the past few days. And it makes me wonder what's going on in your life. So that's where I started. And then I ended that with, long story short, every single time, so when can you get that homework assignment to me by? Okay. You said in 5 days. So in 5 days, I expect it on my desk, right? And so the expectations were clear. I held them to high expectations. There was no, oh, pobrecito, none of that, right? That means poor kid in English. But there was none of that. It was always, this is the bar. You're going to meet it, and I'm here to support you to meet that bar.
Mm-hmm. Another question, thank you. And it also inspires the thought around metacognitive awareness and utilizing that reflection time is it just helps students drive their own learning, right? Which is another powerful has a important effect size. When you achieved high AP scores, how did family support play into that, or family communication and working in community that way?
Yeah, families played a central role in my classroom all the time. So, these results on the AP Calculus exam came with a lot of work, right? Like my students took 5 full-blown AP Calculus exams before they took the real one. So they came in on 5 Saturdays and it was a testing environment and they took it, right? And then I scored them that weekend. And then Monday we started to talk about what areas we needed to work on. Parents knew from the beginning of the year, and I did this through all the different communication channels that I had via email or via the parent portal that we had, and also through inviting parents and telling my students, I expect your parents to be here on opening on the back to school day. I expect them to be here, and I want you to go home and I want you to tell your parents that they need to be here. And I told them this every single day. I had the highest turnout of parents over any teacher in my school. And it was just that daily reminder. I expect your parents to be here. I expect your guardians to be here. Tell them that. And I usually had about 90% of parents showing up. Whereas in other classrooms, you would see somewhere around 10% of parents showing up, right? But it was just that being very deliberate. I expect this, I expect this, I expect this. And then kids would just respond. And so what I did with parents was I helped them understand that this year was going to be a tough year for their kids. I was going to hold them to really high expectations. I was going to make them work hard. And I asked them, because these were families that were living in poverty. So sometimes the kids had to work. Sometimes they had to babysit. Sometimes they had to take on additional responsibilities. So I told the parents, I'm going to need you to take one thing off your child's plate this year. I'm going to need you to take one thing off your child's plate this year because I need them to focus and I need them to work hard. And they're going to be working really hard. I'm going to send them with tough assignments that they're going to be frustrated with at times. You're going to see them. And when you see them being frustrated, just encourage them. Tell them to keep going. I don't need you to teach them calculus. I need you to provide an environment where they can focus. And I need you to keep telling them that they can do it. Keep encouraging them to work hard. So that was my engagement with parents. It was really about engaging them in a way where they understood what I was going to put their kids through, what they were going to go through, and I needed them to think about that and keep that in mind as they supported their kids at home. So, as a high school teacher, it's different than an elementary school teacher, right? There's different levels of parent engagement. As you go up, you all know, right? Like parent engagement declines. And so as a high school teacher, I knew that, and I was very intentional and deliberate. And just every single day, it was like, I believe in you. You can do this. And also, I want to see your parents at back to school night, that kind of thing.
I love it.
Francisco,
And
can I ask you a question? I can totally see you as an administrator, so I'm just looking in the future. As a content teacher, you have the mastery of your class. So everything that you're saying makes sense. Your high expectations, the students, you are in control. But if you were an administrator, a principal or an assistant principal, and you have to go and observe other content teachers that do not have a language goal and are just expecting the MLL teachers to provide all the scaffolds. How would you approach that to make them understand how important it is for them as content teachers to master what you have mastered in your classroom, working with MLLs?
Yeah. Thank you for the question. Olinda, did I say
Yes.
that? So I get to work with administrators all the time, and I get to work in schools all the time when challenges come up, people call me because my approach is very simple. Sometimes people say, we need to do a PD, we need to do this, we need to do that. I'm like, maybe, but first we need to have a conversation. Everything starts there. Everything starts with the conversation. And it's not about accusing and pointing fingers. It's about naming the collective challenge that we're facing and then beginning to identify how we might address those challenges, right? I have conversations with groups of teachers, with schools, with individuals, and my questions are always around like, what is it that you want for your students? Let's start there. And then once I understand what you want for your students, maybe I need to push you a little bit, maybe not, maybe you're there. And so now that we understand that we have a shared understanding of what we want for our students, now we can start talking about what would it take to get there, right? So again, my approach, in the classroom, I was rigorous, but I was also very compassionate and I was also very personable with my students. But at the beginning of the year, I had to be rigid to make sure that kids knew this is a place where we come to work, right? And it's, when I think about adults, it's very similar. It's like we need to have conversations. And once we build trust, then we can be more firm around setting those accountability measures and being, holding people accountable. But when we start there, it's very challenging because sometimes the relationships aren't there. And that's what's most important, starting with getting to know each other. Like I can coach anyone in this space. But first, before I start coaching you, we're going to have a conversation for 15 to 30 minutes where I'm going to share some stuff about myself and I'm going to ask you to do the same. And we're going to get to know each other. And then I'm going to ask you some questions about you as a professional and what you want for your kids. And then we're going to start talking about where you're having success, where you see yourself having success, and where you see yourself struggling. And then I'm going to start with working with you on those things. And then once we have enough trust, then I can start to tell you some things that I see as well. But trust is so critically important, right? Like that's what's most important. I can coach anyone, we can get anyone to do anything, but at the end of the day, it requires trust. We have to start there.
Absolutely. I also love the way you bring humor to this. The high expectations doesn't come without the high supports. That's really the sweet spot that we want to get to. And I mean, it's just so powerful. Your contribution today and your brilliance and what you've been able to bring to this space is just immeasurable, really. And so many resources. I like things that you were saying and making the connections and turning the strategic plan to be alive. Like it's just really powerful, and we're so deeply appreciative of your time and your brilliance, and most importantly, your leadership. I think we got to most of the questions. If we didn't, we will certainly grab them and get them back to you. We want to make sure that we're honoring your time and everybody else's. We'll see you back after lunchtime. What is important for conference participants today is that you check the schedule specifically because there's some 90-minute sessions and some 60-minute sessions. So please be aware of your timing on that. And of course, as always, if there's anything you need, don't hesitate to reach out. Let's have a final shout out and thank you in the chat for Francisco Villegas. It's just an honor to have you here. Maria, did I forget anything?
I don't believe so. I just wanted to echo what you said, Melissa. Thank you so much to Francisco for being here today and sharing his wisdom and inspiring us all on our journey and throughout this conference as we learn and we grow and we work and we go back into our spaces to continue to carry those words with us to transform the system and make sure that we are really making sure that we are meeting the needs of each student that we encounter in our schools. So thank you. As Melissa said, please, please, please make sure that you're checking your schedule. We are so, so thankful. I've got messages on my phone and private chats of people saying how amazing this was and how
Oh.
inspired they are by your message, Francisco. So thank you for being here today and helping Delaware continue to move forward.
Gracias.
Mil gracias, ustedes. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful rest of your conference. We'll see you at closing today. Thank you for the resources. Got your link. Wonderful.
Looking
Thank
for
you, everyone.
is that the TNTP link?
Yep, I put that in the chat, but maybe I can.
Leave in the chat.
It's
Try.
also it's in the Padlet as well.
Okay,
Oh, okay. Thank you, everyone.
absolutely. Dr. Bacon, we love your photos.
Thank you.
Looking good.
Thank you.
Fabulous. All right, everyone. Have a great afternoon. Thank you. I'll reach out later next week, Francisco, touch base.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Ciao.